I would love to. Thank you so much. I'm Leemor Yuravlivker. I'm the Associate Director of Product Design at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, MSK, as I'll call it, in New York City. So it's a pleasure to be here.
So when did you fly in from New York?
On Tuesday.
Yeah.
I've already had some dishoom. I've gone to eat at dishoom, and I've already looked the wrong way when I was crossing the street. So I'm here. I'm happy to be here.
See, this is why people tend to look both ways, because then you've at least looked in the right way at least once.
Yeah, I'll note.
Yeah. Anything else you've done, like sightseeing, if you've been here since Tuesday? But in the time zone difference must have thrown you off a bit.
Yeah, I've been on like adrenaline basically since I've been here. So it's been lovely, but it's been a blur. But I'm very excited to be here with all of you today.
Yeah, cool. What are you going to be talking about for us today?
Yes, I'm really excited to be speaking to you about the culmination, really, of a couple years of work that my team and I have been doing with our clinical research operations department, and some of the impact that we've done together, and some of the takeaways that I have learned through this experience.
Awesome. Right. I'm going to hand over to you then.
Thank you. All right. So as I mentioned, hello, my name is Leemor. I have been at MSK for the last 3 years. And before that, I actually worked with Avi at IBM, Watson for Oncology. I have been on both in-house UX teams and UX consulting. I've done UX consulting as well for the finance, education, life sciences department. My background is in business and computer science with a specialization in human-computer interaction. I've published work and I've spoken at different journals and conferences such as ASCO, UXPA, South by Southwest. I'm based in Brooklyn, and I have a few hobbies up there that I get very excited to talk about. So if you want to come find me later to do that, happy to talk even more if you want to keep listening to me talk. And it's an honor for me really to be leading an in-house UX team at a hospital, which is pretty rare. About 5 years ago, the hospital invested in prioritizing digital transformation to make sure that they enabled the highest quality of care so that the digital experiences match the quality of care that our oncologists and that our clinicians were giving. We're now about 20 members strong. So it's really amazing. And my team works across digital products that include patient experiences, clinician experiences, staff. So we work on a variety of products that support the hospital. And I know we've been in this room all day, but I'm still going to ask you, how many of you work in UX? Please raise your hand. Great. Product. Awesome of your hands. Engineering, clinician, sales, lovely. A couple of representatives. Awesome. And how many of you work at a provider, at a hospital? Anywhere here? No? Okay. Sort of? Okay. Pharma? A couple hands. Awesome. And industry, the most common. Lovely. Well, thank you for sharing. So today I'm going to tell you a story about how my team worked to address some of the top pain points of clinical research coordinators. I'll tell you a little bit more about them. I believe here in the UK, they're called research data managers. I'll tell you about something that we discovered along the way through our user research and working with these coordinators. And I'll give you some strategies that I've learned around transitioning into a user-centered organization, some tips to actually move the organization to be more mindful of users and do some human-centered design thinking. So MSK is really a phenomenal institution. It's 135 years old. It was the first hospital in the US solely dedicated to treating cancer. We have about 24,000 patients that we have the privilege of serving every year. And we run over 4,000 active protocols at a given time, a lot of clinical studies. And we're proud to operate one of the largest clinical trial centers. in the US. And I'll tell you a short story because there's some really patient impacting studies, therapies that come out of these studies. One that got a little bit of, quite a lot of attention last year was a small but historic study that was run by medical oncologist Andrea Sursek and Luis Diaz for completely eliminating the rectal cancer of the 18 patients that participated in the study. I'm talking 100% eliminated the cancer. With participants, they had a particular genetic mutation. And that meant that they didn't have to go through some of the treatments that have debilitating side effects like chemo, surgery, radiation. So these trials are really what progress medicine. They're really important. And when they operate efficiently, they can get life-changing treatments into the hands of patients. But it takes a whole team of people to run a clinical trial. At MSK, we have about 1,200 staff. It's not the nurses, it's not the clinicians, 1,200 staff behind the scenes that are helping run our clinical trials. And I'll be focusing on a group called the clinical research coordinators today and how we work with them. So who are the clinical research coordinators? Their primary goal is to get patient data quickly and accurately into a sponsor database. So like a pharma, whoever's sponsoring the trial, they need to take the patient data at a particular site at their hospital. I wish it was one database, but it's not. It's usually a different system because the pharma is running the trial at multiple different sites many times. They have to get that into that data into the sponsor database. So why is that important to the hospital? Well, without data, there's no trial. And when the hospital agrees to run a clinical trial on behalf of sponsors, there are many contractual obligations as well that they have to meet to get that data in on time so that they can run the trial efficiently. So one of the things that our coordinators do is they find the patient data that's relevant to the trial. They enter that into a different database, and they continue to do that over time as the patient continues to be on the trial. They answer queries. Many times when they enter data into a database, the sponsor will send them questions back being like, are you sure that's the right number? It looks abnormal. Can you double check? Can you make sure that that's in the source? So they have to answer, double check, and close these queries on time. They also have to communicate with the care team, with the nurses that are with the patients. Many times there's missing data that happens. Different nurses do different things. Different departments have different standards. And sometimes they need data that the nurse didn't enter in the first place. They have to talk to them, say, hey, what was really going on here? I need this for the sponsor. Can you please let me know? And please put that into the medical record. Because they're not allowed to put data into the database that's not recorded in the medical record for safety purposes. And lastly, they're managing quite a lot of protocols. It's not just one study that they manage. They're typically, at least at our hospital, managing 5 to 8 different protocols at one time. Each protocol has a lot of different patients that they're responsible for. So they're really juggling different protocols. And guess what? Sponsors typically have different databases as well that they have to enter into. So they're managing all the different logins, all the different things, experiences. They have to become experts in that. And something that has been happening in trials, and I think just in our daily lives as well, is the volume of healthcare data that's being collected is increasing. Phase 3 trials now collect on average 3 times more data than 10 years ago. And on average, there are about 10,000 data points on an oncology trial that a patient generates that needs to be entered for a study. That's a lot of data. And then for oncology, they tend to be longer, they tend to be more costly. And we like to think of data as a great thing, and it is. But for coordinators that are looking for relevant data, that extra data is actually a burden to them. So when I joined MSK, I specifically, part of my focus was working with the clinical research IT department. And I was relatively new to the world of clinical trials. I had a lot of learning to do. But they were telling me about the clinical research coordinators and that there was a lot of manual work that they were doing to enter data from a patient file into a sponsor database. And they didn't really know where they wanted to tackle this problem, but they didn't know where to begin. So I was like, well, user research sounds like a great place to start. Why don't we go ahead and talk to a few coordinators? Let's see what they find as the biggest pain point in this process. And so we actually got a small group together and we interviewed a few of our coordinators. And here are a few of the things that we heard from them. Okay, number one, too many clinical systems to manage. I was alluding to this a little bit before. They have to manage and sift through our clinical systems, and it's not just one system, there are many systems, and they have to manage all of the other all of the other sponsor databases. So we heard that this was hard to coordinate across platforms. It was also not easy to find the relevant data. In particular, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but when a patient has an adverse event when they're on a trial, if they feel nausea, for example, and they get medication to deal with that adverse event, it's important for the sponsors to know that there's that direct correlation. But it's difficult, it's really difficult actually to find in the records because it's usually not built like that. The EHRs or the medical records aren't built for clinical research. So they typically have to sift and find the things that they need. So this in particular, getting all the medications into this other database, it was just taking them forever. And lastly, the data is only as good as you get. So it's frustrating for them to deal with missing data. Sometimes I've seen that it takes them 20, 30 minutes to look for data, and then it's not even there. And they have to go ask somebody else. So now I want you to stay with me because I'm going to jump over a lot of details and go to a spoiler alert. There was a lot of processes we used to build a solution from 0 to 1. But I'm going to sprinkle in a couple stories later on, and I'm happy to talk about it after the talk. But what we ended up doing was we released a digital product to help our coordinators called CT Data Hub, which we released in July of last year. This was an in-house product that we built as really a single hub for our coordinators to help them with their efficiency in finding the data, the satisfaction of the process, and also the accuracy in actually entering that data to the sponsor database. We published some of our work last year as well. And we measured the impact of how this affected our coordinators, but something unexpected happened as we were conducting our user research. One of our coordinators actually said something that took us a little bit by surprise. Nobody gives us attention. We have to work with what the clinicians and nursing do. It's nice to be getting attention on how to make our lives easier, and I appreciate that. Now, this was a pretty impactful moment for me because what struck me about this particular quote was how vulnerable this person was being about how they were feeling as a clinical research coordinator, about not feeling seen or heard. And this was from one of the focus calls that we did. And we started to reflect a little bit on some of the previous research that we had done and started tuning into, is this just an individual's feeling, or is there something bigger that's happening at a macro level about coordinators and this data work? And what we found when we looked more into the research was that data work in healthcare often occurs in the background and is usually undervalued. Almost 3/4 of coordinators are thinking of changing jobs, and they typically have a higher turnover rate than other jobs in the US. And this is important because it can cost up to $25,000 to train a new coordinator over 3 months. And this delays the trial, and this delays getting the treatment in the patient's hands. So not only did we want to increase the satisfaction of our staff and in this industry, there's also real costs associated with this problem. And now I'm not saying that UX is the magic pill to cure their satisfaction. We looked into this. There are a lot of reasons that this can occur, but I'm saying that this can at least start the conversation and bring the voices to the table. Right. So what I realized as well was that because the organization gave us some space to do human-centered design by prioritizing solving the right problems for real people, we were able to raise that level of awareness and empathy towards our coordinators. And at the most basic level, help them feel heard and connected to one another too. When they started hearing each other's problems, they were like, oh, I'm not alone in this. Because especially after COVID, many of them work remotely too. And that can increase that sense of not feeling appreciated. And so we heard this. Back to CT Data Hub, we started to understand that we were uncovering something bigger here. And there were a couple of signs that led us to that conclusion. We were gaining some momentum also, not just within MSK by helping our coordinators do their jobs more efficiently, but also with other organizations. And back in May of 2023, May of last year, we signed a partnership with Ignite Data, who is based in the UK, and Jess introduced herself before. She's from that. We're really excited to be partnering with them in assisting. They really specialize in assisting sites move data electronically to different sponsors. So they keep track of all the mapping of different sites, have different data mapping, and they send it directly to the sponsors. And it really meshes well with what our focus is, which is around the coordinator workflow and making sure they can do things more efficiently. So it's a really great partnership. We started utilizing this technology back in November. We went live with our first study with Johnson & Johnson. We have more studies down the pipeline and are collaborating closely to integrate our experiences together. The second sign that we figured out we might be onto something bigger actually came in the form of an email. So I mentioned that I'd published some work that we were doing around interviewing coordinators, trying to solve some of their pain points. And a coordinator from a different hospital actually emailed us. And she said, oh my gosh, I feel this pain point. I want to do this user research at my hospital. This was a coordinator, not a UX designer. Can we get on a call and talk about this? And can I get some of your advice on how to run this research? And we got on this call, and it was really incredible because she had been in the media sector before. So she had been exposed to human-centered design and UX research, and she somehow stumbled upon our publication and just got it and was like, wow, there are opportunities to improve this and to help our coordinators do our job more efficiently. I want to understand how it works at our hospital. So that was really a special moment, and also how much impact UX can have by being in this space, to help inspire others to make their jobs easier and more efficient and more satisfactory. So that was very exciting for us. So what's next for CT Data Hub? What's next for our coordinators? Something that we're currently starting to investigate is unstructured data, which is a big problem in healthcare. Doctor's notes, outside medical records. Not everything is as structured as you might want or think. And so we're going to start exploring, what do coordinators really need from unstructured data? What do they typically find in the medical notes? And I have AI with a question mark there, because AI seems like it could be a good option to help us with this, but we're not sure. And we don't want to put AI in our solution just for the sake of having AI. It's our responsibility as UX designers, as product owners, to make sure that we integrate this technology responsibly and mindfully. And we want to do that research and remain human centered in this process. We want to bring coordinators on with us. We want to test with them. We want to understand how this would be most useful to them so that when we release it, it's safe and it's valuable to them. And it's not just because we wanted to implement AI. So I kind of joke here, which comes first, the chicken, the AI, or the egg? The user needs. And I've seen products struggle with this sometimes because there is a lot of excitement around AI. Well, there should be, but we need to approach it responsibly. All right, I've talked about addressing the top pain points of coordinators and what we uncovered in the process. I'm going to leave you with a few notes on some of the strategies that have helped me kind of talk about user-centered design and transforming the clinical research operations department to be more user-centered. Because they had not worked with UX design beforehand. And I know as a consultant, sometimes that happens where you work with a client that is unfamiliar with UX. So I have been there. And sometimes it can feel like you're a cat in a room full of dogs talking about different methodologies. You just want to be with the dogs. You want to be part of them. So just a fun fact, that pug that you see on the left-hand side, his name is Klaus. He's 16 years old. He is the dog of our product owner. And I'm contractually obliged to include him in all of my presentations. People support what they help build. This is all about getting buy-in, right? The skepticism that you might face. What I found is really important is to set expectations and get input often and early. It can be a new space for people. They don't know what to expect. And so laying out that vision of the process that you're going to be following, bringing everybody on board is a really important step. And something that I've found to be particularly helpful. Usually a project starts with user research, and I'll take that opportunity to collaborate on the user research plan. In particular, I'll put the plan together, put all my hypotheses down. What are some key questions? How are we going to run this research? What do we expect to learn at the end of this research? And I'll be like, what did I miss? Tell me. How can we get this to meet your expectations from the start? And that already starts to set the tone of collaboration together. So I really enjoy this process. Who's funding the project or the product? It's really important to get some time to listen to what's driving executive leadership to actually care about this. This can help you also tailor your language when you're talking about delivering value back to them and what impact actually means. It's important to understand, what do they actually care about? What words are they using? What metrics affect them? So that when you come back, they're more encouraged to continue to investing in you and continuing to support on the project. And the last item here is co-owning workshops, research, strategy. I ran a design thinking workshop in person with our team. And instead of coming in and saying, I'm going to run a UX design thinking workshop, all of you follow me, I approached the lead product owner and the lead engineer beforehand, and I asked them, hey, can you help me write an introduction together so we can come in and you explain why it's important from the hospital, why we should be investigating this, from the engineer, the feasibility, the technical challenges that might happen, why it's important to move forward together. And so that created this environment of, hey, we're in this together. It's not just UX coming in, but like actually getting the buy-in and the investment. Then they were like, oh, I have to put an intro together. Okay, well, now I'm invested in this. But it was a really great way to set the tone with the rest of the team that we're in this to solve this problem together. UX advocacy never stops. I think this is a misconception that it can stop one day, but I've found in my experience that it doesn't. There are different volumes of UX advocacy that happens. but it really hasn't stopped. The first one is creating space on your team for UX education. Doesn't have to be right off the bat. You don't have to come in hot, but a few weeks, a few months in, I've run UX 101 workshops with my team. And I like to use this metric in particular when they're like, why are we spending this time on UX research? Well, $1 spent in UX research means $10 saved in development costs and $100 saved in post-release work. So I think it's beneficial for us to do this research now so we don't have to come back later and rework this. A couple slides for these other two. Measuring impact and success. I alluded to this before. It's really important when it comes to communicating the value of your work. Otherwise, it ends in so what? Something that was important for us was the amount of time that our coordinators was spending. We ran an impact study, and it showed that our coordinators were saving 2 hours each week in that data abstraction process, right? And this was just from our MVP launch. So we were hoping now with more data that continues to increase, but we were able to communicate that because we were strategic about coming in at the beginning as a team, being like, what's important to us? What metrics are important to us? And how are we going to measure this over time so that we can come back later and talk to our stakeholders, talk to our executive leadership, and show them the impact of our work. And lastly is one I around publishing UX work in healthcare journals. This was almost out of luck that I stumbled upon this one because it was not obvious to me until I entered the healthcare space. But I actually worked with a really incredible epidemiologist back at IBM, and I was doing some user research with her, and we were publishing. We were working on some projects together, and she came up to me. She's like, I think you can publish your work. I was like, publish where? Who? Why? But she really helped me. We worked on this together, and I published my first paper for an epidemiology conference and audience. And I was the only I ended up being able to go to that conference. I was the only UX designer in the room of healthcare professionals. But I think that's really important because that's an audience that you can make so much impact on, and that has a lot of times never heard of UX before. So there's really a space to make an impact through publishing your work, through sharing your work in these, especially coming from an academic focus center. There's a lot of impact that you can make through these channels, so don't overlook them. Yeah, so our stakeholders as well, they really care about publications too. Again, in academic worlds, it gets them recognition. So I would encourage to explore this means if you haven't already. All right. So I wrapped up with speaking about some strategies of how to transition your organization into a more user-centered department. And I'll leave you on a few final thoughts on what I think the biggest eye-opener that I've had throughout these past few years. There is a big opportunity for UX to make a difference for people who may feel and may often go overlooked by shining a light on them. There's a lot of people that work in the background of hospital operations that don't usually get that much attention. And I think that there is a big opportunity there. And I've seen firsthand the value of asking, what do you think? Taking the time to listen, bringing those voices back into the stakeholder table, into the world of product. Not only does it create greater efficiency gains, but it can lead to an increased feeling of appreciation and also break down silos. Ultimately, that's what the foundation of human-centered design is all about. And there are no limits as to where we can apply it. Thank you. And a big thank you. This is not just my work, it's the work of many other people as well. So just a really big shout out to the team. And what questions do you have for me?
Yep, at the back here.
Can you hear me?
You can.
Thank you. My name is Subhash. I belong to Base Life Science, which is a European life science consulting firm as a clinical trial practice lead. So I cannot agree more than what you mentioned regarding the pain points of CRCs, because I worked as a data manager in the past 20 years. And when we used to discuss, the queries part, especially with the CRCs, and we started journey from paper to EDC now. So I was just wondering now with the different source of data that is now flowing, and especially after COVID, the decentralized trials has come into the picture with a lot of different systems. So EDC is just 30%. So, and remaining are your other sources of data coming from, smartwatch, sensors, wearables, eCOA, eConsent, ePros, a lot of the different systems. So how are we handling that using the city data hub? Is it only EDC that is being taken care in your current solutioning, or because you mentioned also we have to deal with different, assigning with different systems, CRCs.
Yeah.
So is this bringing all together your signing problems and different data, how it is going?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say it depends on the trial.
Yep.
Primarily. For us, the data that goes over to the EDCs, and for those who don't, EDC is Electronic Data Capture System. It's the name of the sponsor database. Really, the data that goes into there has to be like verified and looked at by a clinical team, at least for us. And that does include, sometimes it could include remote data devices. Again, it just depends on the trial itself. What's not happening is that, at least I haven't seen, is you have like a watch or something like that going directly to the EDC. I haven't seen that at our hospital, at least. There might be other trials that I don't know about that does that. But it's important to have accountability on what data is actually going in there and making sure that it's relevant data for the trial. And that's why we have our coordinators also overlook the data, even if it's electronically transferred. We don't just send it. We have somebody go in and verify and make sure that that's accurate. There was a timestamp, that they've looked at that. That is important in the trial. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely, to a large extent. But it's still, the CRC is still overloaded to use multiple systems at the same time. And that's the, pain point we do feel in industry still exists. And that's why, nobody noticed that the pain that they are going through. So how do we, handle that actually?
Well, CT Data Hub is the idea is to be that one hub of the relevant data that they need. So regardless if it's coming from other systems, it gets funneled into CT Data Hub so that they don't have to look at all of the other, I'm going to say noise. They only look at the data that's relevant for their trial. So it gets funneled through all the other systems. It funnels through CT Data Hub and then goes to the electronic data capture system.
So we are talking about only EHR, e-source data, which is captured at the hospital, and that goes, you don't have to capture it multiple times for different, sponsors, right? You have one source. Is that my understanding correct?
I would say so. There's obviously, response data. I mean, the patient might be on multiple trials at the same time as well. So, you can get into the nuances of different special situations.
Okay.
But yeah.
No worries.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And happy to talk more after as well. It's great.
Thanks,
And-
Leemor.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Yes, Maria.
Hi, Maria 1 here. You talked about advocating for UX design throughout the whole process. I'm wondering, since it's like a hospital environment and you have a team of 20, how do you deal with the, I don't know, the pain of having to continuously advocate for the work of your team, the work that you yourself are doing in this environment? Because I know from talking, like from my own experience and talking with other professionals in the field, the continuous need to be advocating for your work can be very draining. how do you experience it in your environment? And like what strategies have worked for your team?
We've definitely felt that pain. So I hear you on that one. What we love, if we can, by showing them kind of small wins, is to get sponsors or other people who advocate on our behalf to speak the language. So sometimes we'll have a product owner that's worked with design, maybe didn't know about it much. And we've had to work to prove the value. It doesn't just, they don't just believe you off the bat, but once there are those small wins, we say, hey, would you mind talking about your experience working with design on this, department-wide organization? When it comes from someone that's not UX, there's a different level of impact. And so our team has been working to try and get more and more kind of advocates who are not UX. And I found that strategy to be very helpful in starting to change the mindset of the organization.
I want to throw that same question to the audience if there's anybody that wants to add to that from their own experiences. Or is everything perfect for you? Yeah.
I'm going to come
Hang
at
on,
it from a
who are
different
you?
perspective. Oh, sorry. I'm Charisse from the University of Southampton. So I work in academia, slightly different to the rest of you. But for us, we are missing user experience and research in clinical trials. And I'm glad that you've done this talk. And I think there's lots of different aspects. And I fully advocate for publishing in health and care journals as well. What's tending to happening now in our space is the funders of clinical trials are doing things called studies within a trial, which they're basically funding the embedding of user research in trials to try and improve things like recruitment, retention, staff pain points and things like that. So at some point someone has heard, I think you just got to keep banging the drum sometimes and the right people here. And if you can get a top-down approach, that can be helpful as well as a bottom-up approach as well. But that's what's happening with us. The funders are now advocating for that. It's more like 10K pots to do little studies to improve things and make them more efficient.
Awesome.
I think ultimately the best way for this to change, there needs to be policies, it needs to be part of regulation that you have to have user experience professionals in so many different aspects of healthcare when it's mandated. Like no one would question why there is a surgeon when a patient needs an operation. It's just a no-brainer. Of course you would have a surgeon. Why can't it be like that to have UX researchers working on digital health projects? Why is it not just a no-brainer that you would have them? Well, you have to have the engineer, you have to have the scrum master, have to have the product owner, but you don't have to have the researcher. It's wrong that currently there's people that would push back and fire us, quite frankly. A lot of us have been let go. I'm not speaking from experience, but I know a lot of people that have been let go because their position has been seen as redundant, or worse, that someone else could do it as well as them, who haven't had any training, hasn't got any experience. Maybe there's a subject matter expert, but as a subject matter expert coming from a clinical background, trust me, doing medicine alone does not make me a UX professional. It was my master's in human computer interaction with ergonomics part-time at the University of College London. So yeah, there's a little bit of rant there. But yeah, that's a really, really good question. Thank you. Any more questions?